Now let us focus on what exactly critical thinking is all about. Critical thinking is thinking, but in a different way. Many people describe this process using terms such as being analytical, being thoughtful, questioning, probing, being non-emotional, organized, innovative, being Socratic, logical, methodical, not taking things for granted, examining details, being exhaustive, thinking outside the box, being scientific, and being procedural. Odds are that you have heard and probably used a few of these terms, but what exactly do they mean? Now, critical thinking is manual thinking. It is not automatic, it is purposeful, being aware of the partiality of your thinking. Now, let's probe a little more in understanding what exactly is this topic of critical thinking all about. Often we use the word critical, we mean negative, fault finding. This is the sense we have in our mind. For example, when we complain about a parent or a friend who think in an unfairly critical of what we do or say. But critical also means involving or exercising skilled judgment or observation. In this sense, critical thinking means thinking clearly and intelligently. More precisely, critical thinking is the general term given to the wide range of cognitive skills, intellectual dispositions needed to effectively identify, analyze, and evaluate arguments and truth claims, to discover and overcome personal preconceptions and biases, to formulate and present convincing reasons in support of conclusions, and to make reasonable, intelligent decisions about what to believe and what to do. Put somewhat differently, critical thinking is disciplined thinking governed by clear intellectual standards. Among the most important of these intellectual standards are clarity, precision, accuracy, relevance, consistency, logical correctness, completeness, and fairness. The word critical has its origin in the Greek language with the word kritikos, Kritikos, which means discerning judgment, and criterion, which stands for standards. Thus, critical thinking is the ability to discern judgment based on standards. Paul our elder, I repeat again, Paul our elder, through years of rumination and research, has listed out the elements of our thought as. Let's begin our introduction to this critical thinking by looking briefly at each of these important critical standards. After acquainting ourselves with the standards and the element which constitute, let us now focus on the framework or essential dimensions of critical thinking. Our conception of critical thinking is based on the substantial approach developed by Dr. Richard Paul and his colleagues at the Center of Foundation for Critical Thinking. Then what we would do is what Paul Elder has said when it comes with understanding what are the elements of thought. First, he says that we normally think that thinking is something which happens in a subconscious state of mind, but when it comes to critical thinking, we have already said it is not automatic, but it is manual. So Paul Elder says that it's something to do with the elements of thought, where he says that thinking has got a purpose, a goal, or an objective. You have a question. Now you are trying to discern information. There is an interpretation that is involved. There are concepts which are related with theories and other things there. There are some intertwined assumptions that are there, and there is an intelligence which is involved in trying to figure out things which are there, and there is a point of view which is associated with elements of thought. Now just recall a moment ago, we have just said that critical thinking is discerning judgment based on standards. Now what we have just said is listed out what are the various elements which are there in the elements of thoughts. Let's focus a little on what these standards are all about. So can we go about with understanding what the standards are? Now to begin with, when it comes to the word standards, we look at the word clarity. When you are having a thought process there, it could be cluttered, it could be muddied. There are lot many thoughts crisscrossing your mind at the same time. But in critical thinking, one of the most basic essential standards is you got to have clarity. Now you got to have what is called as accuracy. Now you need to go about with having an element of precision. Now without these things there, critical thinking is not possible. And can we think about any of those other standards which are there? Now here we say that we are trying to get into the depth of what the issue is all about, the breadth of what the issue is all about, the logic that is involved, the significance or how important is it. And once we go about with understanding these elements there, then we are trying to find a solution to the problems. So repeating once again, we said that critical thinking is all about discerning judgment based on standards. So when you are trying to go about with coming with a judgment, without the standards, the judgment does not have any sense of validity. Now they have come out with a very beautiful model which goes about with suggesting how do you relate the elements of thoughts, the standards, the intellectual aspect part of it, what happens in critical thinking. Let's go about it looking at this there. Now here we have just listed out what these standards are. We have said what the elements of thoughts are. Now the standards and the elements of thoughts get into what is called as the intellectual traits that are there. So based on this, we go about with trying to make a judgment as to what is to be worked out and what is not. Now till now we are harping on this point of what is this critical thinking all on. To get a better judgment as to who are actually the critical thinkers and who are the other types of critical thinkers who are non-critical or uncritical kind of thinkers, that will give you immense insights in understanding the concept of what this critical thinking is all about. Now to go about the understanding as to how critical thinkers are different from the other kinds of thinkers, and for this context let us say that the ones who think are critical thinkers and those who don't think critically, we'll call them as uncritical thinkers. To begin with, let's discern what these two types of thinkers, then you'll get a deeper understanding as to what this critical thinking is all about. Now critical thinkers are the ones who are passionate, have a drive for clarity, precision, accuracy and other critical thinking standards. But when you compare them with the uncritical thinkers, they often think in ways that are imprecise, unclear and inaccurate. Let us look at another issue. The critical thinkers are considered to be very sensitive to ways in which critical thinking can be skewed with egocentrism, sociocentrism and wishful thinking and other impediments that are there. But when you compare them with the uncritical thinkers, they often fall prey to personal egos about the societal aspects that are there and thinking unwarranted assumptions, and wishful thinking is very familiar with the uncritical thinkers. And another issue that is there with the critical thinkers is they are skilled at understanding, analyzing, evaluating arguments and viewpoints. But when you compare them or contrast them with the uncritical thinkers, they are often misunderstood and they have a sense of misunderstanding for evaluation, for unfair arguments and viewpoints. Now let's look at some more issues which are there. Now the critical thinkers are the ones who reason logically and draw appropriate conclusions from evidence and data. The uncritical thinkers think illogically and draw unsupported conclusions from evidence and data. That undermines the basic difference between critical and unthinking, or the non-critical thinkers who are based not on evidence and data. And the critical thinkers are intellectually honest with themselves, acknowledging what they don't know and recognizing their limitations. Now compare them with the uncritical thinkers. They pretend they know more than they do and ignore their limitations. Now the other issue that is there is the critical thinkers listen open-mindedly to opposing points of view and welcome criticisms of belief and assumptions. At this point, let us understand the word criticism. Criticism could be understood in two ways. One is called as constructive criticism and other is to do with destructive criticism. If someone is trying to belittle, insult or put you low, we say it is to do with destructive criticism. But when you use the word constructive criticism, what exactly does it mean is we are thinking about exploring better ways of doing. We are thinking about how things can be done in a better way there. Now in this situation, when you compare the uncritical thinkers, they are closed-minded. They resist criticisms of beliefs and assumptions that are there. So they don't invite others' opinions. That is one of the features when you look at the uncritical thinkers. Now, when it comes to the critical thinkers, they base their beliefs and facts and evidence rather than on personal preferences and self-interest. Often, when you compare them with the uncritical thinkers, they base their beliefs more on personal preferences or self-interest. Now, these are some of the issues we have discussed. Let's go further. And here we see that the critical thinkers that are there are aware of the biases and the preconceptions that shape the way we perceive what the world is all about. Now, let's understand what that word perception is. We have 5 sense organs. We receive stimuli through the 5 sense organs. Our mind processes the stimuli, and this is what results in our values, beliefs, and attitudes. Our values, beliefs, and attitudes ultimately leads to our behavior. Now, when you compare the uncritical thinkers, they lack awareness of their own biases and preconceptions. And on the other hand, when you look at the critical thinkers, they think interdependently and are not afraid to disagree with group opinion. But when it comes to the uncritical thinker, they tend to engage in groupthink. Now, what happens here is you toe in line with others and you have a fear, like if you don't go about it agreeing with the group there, you'll be ostracized. In that sense, the uncritical thinkers indulge in group thinking, and their beliefs and values which are related with the crowd, they become one with them. Now, come for another issue that is related with the critical thinkers. They are able to get to the heart of an issue or the problem without being distracted by details. Now, in contrast, when you compare the uncritical thinkers, they are easily distracted and lack the ability to zero in on the essence and the issues of what the problem is. So, till now, whatever we have gone about with studying, we have seen what is analytical thinking, we have seen what is critical thinking, and we have gone about with understanding Paul Elder's model as to what these standards are, what are the intellectual traits that are there, and how is the problems being solved. And we have gone about with trying to check out as to how the critical thinkers are different from the uncritical thinkers. Now, in the later part, what we would do is we would understand as to what are the steps that are involved in critical thinking, and later understand what are the benefits, what exactly do we get when we become critical thinkers.